Start. Yeah, it started this time. That's good. All right, I'll maximize. Actually, the part I could have been doing instead of chatting is loading up SQL Server. So do you guys have any questions before I get started in general? So I'm giving it a title. Some of these I think you'll recognize fairly easily. The set operators maybe not, but the modifying data, what we mean by that is insert, update, and delete. So you guys have probably seen most of that. A little bit of things I'll add to it. So do you guys remember, like, now I don't know, things have changed, but high school algebra where you did Venn diagrams? So the set operators are essentially like Venn diagram operators. Union is where the things come together, but they share in common, right? In fact, more than what they share in common, it's everything. It's both bubbles together. Right? So if you have two circles, the union encompasses everything that's in those two circles. There's an intersection operator, and that's the part where the two intersect. And there's might have to look this up. There's I'm trying to remember the keyword. There's an exclusive, but that's not the name of the thing, where it shows where they don't match, where things are different. As I said, I might have to look up that keyword. I knew it 2 seconds ago, but my brain is aging rapidly, I think. All right. And then, as I said, it'll be insert, update, and delete. Interesting, Postgres has more set theory operators than SQL Server, but we're not doing Postgres. So. So let's do a union. So a union combines the sets. So I am going to, I'm going to from, so what am I using? Right now I'm using master. So let's use community assist. So I'm going to select person, last name, person, first name, person, email. What else do I want from person? Let's do, because we'll be using this later, let's make this a little bit of a join, which is a bit weird, but I'm going to do person, city. Actually, so I need to look at something in Metro Alt under employees. Well, I actually, we're going to combine it with Metro Alt, so I needed to make sure that, so we do have city. I think that's, so we just got their names, their emails, and their cities. I think that's actually probably enough. And I'm going to do from person. And at this point, I'm just going to do an inner join person address. On person key equals person address dot person key. So I just want person address dot person key. So at the top here, I'm going to run this just separate. Why doesn't it person address city? And when I run that, I get these. But what if I wanted to combine all the people from this with all the people from all the employees? Right? Two different sets, two different databases. They don't have to be two different databases, but they can be. So this has 134 rows, but say we really want a big mailing list. So I'm going to use the word union. Union, as I said, combines the two sets. And what I need to do when I do employee here, they have to match the fields, not the names, but they have to match the type, data types basically for the fields, and they have to have the same number of fields. It combines the two things into one output, right? So I'm going, and you can do this. Like if you were doing an insert into a table, you could insert from a union if you wanted to have a really big table. But I'm going to select, so it's employee last name, employee first name, employee email, and employee city. So we have the same number of fields and the same basic type of fields. Now, how do you do? So this is a different database, right? So I am going to have to say from Metro Alt, right? I'm going to, because it's not in the same database. We're in Community Assist. I'm going to do DBO dot, and then I'm going to do employee. So what I'm doing here is I'm fully qualifying the table because I have to say where it's coming from. It's coming from Metro Alt. It belongs to the schema DBO, which is database owner, and the table name is employee. Does that make sense? And it's really important that these have exactly the same number of fields and that they be the same data type. It actually doesn't care if they're this. Like if I switch first name and last name, it would execute just fine. It would be a bit of a mess, but it would execute just fine. That's okay. Go ahead and get set up. We're doing unions and okay. Set theory things. Not a lot of them, but. So a union will join these two things. It'll join everything from the person table with everything from the employee table for those four fields. So when I do this, it gives me, I don't know, you can't see because it's real tiny, but 625 rows. So as we go down, there's a lot of atoms. It does sort of automatically alphabetize, and I've never been sure why. I mean, it sort of sorts by last name for whatever reason. The fact that there are so many atoms is partially just because of the way I populated the Metro Alt. I had an array of last names and an array of first names, and I looped through them. And I think each array had maybe 30, 40 values. So there's a lot of the same last names in there, but they did manage to get pretty unique first names. Notice the Metro Alt things there, and the ones that are not Metro Alt are from Community Assist.
How can you tell? Like, can you tell? I'm just looking at which one and which.
I can because everybody in Metro Alt has metroalt.com as an email. But if the emails were more varied, no, you wouldn't be able to tell. And it wouldn't, you know, I mean, your whole point is you're combining them, so you wouldn't necessarily.
Is there a way to flag it though?
I don't know. Let me see.
Like what? Which table do you feel is going to be running?
Take it one more visual.
I do not know if this will work. Yeah, it did work. See where it says person, 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 employee, employee, employee. So it puts a literal in there for the top and then a literal down here. So you could flag it. I didn't put a column name on there. It doesn't actually make sense to alias the other one because they don't show up as field names.
How does like it know to combine it in the same like row? Like I know like
It only knows that this is first and this is first. This
Oh.
is second, this is second, this is third, this is third. It does it purely by position. It doesn't understand what the field names are at all. Right, and if you screwed up the field names, because these are all string, all character types, you can put them in any order down here, but you just have a mess as an output. Right, it's sort of, all it cares about is that there are the same number of columns and that they're the same data types as the one above. And it really first to first, second to second, third to third, and fourth to fourth, etc. It doesn't know what you're doing. It depends on you to know what you're doing.
It seems that it just alphabetizes whatever the
It
first
is-
thing, whatever the first
It
thing
does
you
seem
have.
to create a sort on that, and I'm not, it must be something built into their union function. But
And interesting, if you sort by, like, I just was playing around with it, if you sort by city, it organizes alphabetically by city, but then it also moves on, and within the city alphabetizes by last name.
Right, so there's a built-in, it's possible there's a built-in index in here. You know, I'm not sure how they're implementing the union function. But they might create an index to make it speedier, because it could be quite, imagine if these tables had millions of rows, it could be quite extensive time-wise. And creating an index can speed things up. So it's possible that that's happening inside of it, I don't know. These are kind of black boxes, these commands, when you, if you actually want to know how they're implemented. But does union make sense? And again, this could be really useful. So if you had multiple tables with people in them and you wanted to create one big email list, you know, you can do that. There's probably other situations too where you'd want to join, you know, things from different tables. They can be in the same database, but they can also be across databases and they can be across servers. If you were to go to another server, this is SQL Express. But you could do, so it'd be SQL Express.metroalt.dbo, but it's different, whatever the name of the server is, dot, question?
yeah, is this like what companies do when you were just saying like when they're trying to create like a mailing list?
Well, it
Oh, like,
depends.
okay.
It depends, they could get it all, I mean, they might get it all from one database, like everybody, all the customers that have registered, they might just take those emails.
Can we keep adding on? Sorry. We keep adding
I
on.
don't think so, as far as I have played with this before. I think union is just two. I don't think you can have union and then another union, and then another union. I think it's just two elements here. Now, you could, we don't necessarily want to do this right now, but you could do this union into a temp table and do another union with that temp table and some other table. I mean, you could build that way. Does that make sense? We haven't done temp tables yet, but we will. I mean, so you could do it in steps like that, but I'm pretty sure union is a binary operator and that there's just, it will only work on two tables at a time. All right, so union is when you have the Venn diagrams, it's both bubbles. Right, so the other one, the intersection, and I am going to just do these, except I don't want, because there'll be no intersection much if we do just names and stuff. So I guess I'll write it. I'm going to select just the city. So let's do person, address, city. I'm going to alias it as city. Okay. We'll just do person, address, because we don't need all the other stuff. And in fact, if we include the other stuff, it will give us a problem. And then I'm going to do a new other operator, which is intersection. Or intersect. There we go. And I'm going to select city, or employee city, from, and then I need to do that, metro alt.dbo, and it won't work if you leave the DBO out. You have to say what schema the table belongs to. Employee. So what this will do is it'll tell us the cities that are in both person, address, and employee. So if I run that, I get Bellevue, Kent, and Seattle are common. Does that make sense?
So going back to the Venn diagram, this is
This is the part.
overlapping part.
Yeah, so this would be, this is this part, right? The union is everything. Yeah.
So, is this, all the cities that are like more than one, or is it just every city?
It's every city that's common. It's not doing it. So somebody has a Bellevue, but there could be a dozen of them.
Right.
So it does a distinct.
Okay, I was wondering.
There's sort of a distinct built into it. And again, that's part of the weirdness. Like Union has the sorts. This has a built-in distinct, because it only returns the distinct values. It doesn't return all the values. Weirdly, I think if I do this opposite, so I'm going to do exactly the same thing, except I'm going to do the employee first. And then I'll do the intersect. Didn't have, whoa, I guess I didn't copy it. All right, let's just do intersect. I'm just reversing the order. What did I do? All right. So what I want to do is just the opposite. Because and I'll get rid, I'll just move that up to there. Okay. Let's see if we get the same cities. It should be. It is the same. The excluding one, they aren't necessarily the same. The exclusion one is the ones that are in the first one that are not in the second one. Does that make sense?
It's just the outer parts.
Yeah, it's just the outer parts, right? But it isn't the same. It changes depending on which one you do first. Okay, so these are the same whichever way you do them, because there's parts that are joined. It's that middle part that should be the same. These are fairly new operators for SQL Server, by the way, like 2015. As you know, I mean, they're fairly new. They've been in Oracle for about a decade, but they're fairly new for SQL Server. They are part of the ANSI standard, but they're fairly, I mean, nobody had ever implemented them except Oracle pretty much.
You would think that this would be very useful.
I think it is useful, yes. And there were probably other ways to get there, but you know, I think that the reason they weren't implemented is that underneath these are probably really hard to do.
Probably.
Now, I still haven't remembered the third one. Anybody off the top of their head know what the exclusion one is? I don't think it's exclusion.
You have a question in the homework that says do and accept.
That's it. Thank you. Why does accept? Why was it escaping me? I know how to do this. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Except I'm going to change it to accept. Accept is the opposite. It's not where the things join. It's where they don't join. So this one is doing Metro Alt first. So these are all, there's only one city in Metro Alt that is not in person, and that's Tukwila. Okay. But if we flip that, that's the reverse is not the same.
Yes.
Yeah, if we flip that, there are cities in person that are, there are more cities in person that are not in employee. So I'm going to flip that and you'll see that there's different cities here. So in Metro Alt, Tukwila is the only city that is not in person. But there are cities in person that are not in employee. So if I do, I'm just going to do select person, address, city, from person address. I'm going to do accept, and then we'll just do this one. Get rid of the city here. It, as I said, it never shows the field name from the second part of the. So aliasing it doesn't make sense. So there's New York, Puyallup, Redmond, and Shoreline that are in, plus a couple of empty spots that are in person address that are not in Metro Alt. Metro Alt doesn't have New York, Puyallup, Redmond, or Shoreline, but it does have Tukwila, which is not in the other one. This is a null, somebody didn't enter the city, and this is an empty string because I probably didn't adjust the web form, and I just entered an empty string instead of a null. So do those, they're not hard. These aren't hard. They might be, you guys have questions on those? Those are the basic secondary ones.
Yes, why would it be useful if it's not showing the stuff for both? Like, why would you join?
Well, you can still see, I mean, you might want to know what things are in this database that are not in another database. And the only thing I would say is in this one, you need to make sure which one you're checking, or, you know, which one matters, I guess, in terms of what's different in it than the other. You might want to know, I mean, you could be comparing, I have no idea. You might be registered customers. You might want to see, you know, in this database, that maybe you're having them register in different databases for whatever bizarre reason, but it's not atypical of different servers for different regions and things. So you might want to see what's different in one than the other. Maybe in one region, there's things are being sold that are not being sold in another region. I don't know. I mean, it's a fairly fast way to find difference between two sets. Whereas this is a fairly quick way to find intersection, you know, the sameness between two sets. And joining it is usually, I think, just to make bigger lists for things. You know, I think they all can be useful in their own.
Sorry,
Yeah.
can you repeat it? So these are the cities that are in person address.
These are the ones that are in person that are
Not in
not,
person.
not in employees. So the first one here, so it's, let's go down. It's this one. So these are the cities that are in person address that are not in employee. And if you do it in the reverse order, there's only one city and employee that is not in person, which is Tukwila.
Thank you.
And why are that? I mean, invent addresses off the top of my head when I'm doing these things. I actually wrote a neat function for employee for the Metro Alt that would create an address. So again, it had an array of street names. It had an array of whether it was going to be street, boulevard, way, etc. It had a random number. I mean, the addresses were. My script for Metro Alt took 3 days to run. Very inefficient. Loops inside of loops inside of loops. It would be a nightmare of O notation. Has anybody ever done O notation? It's a optimization mathematics. When you're trying to optimize a query or a programming code, basically what it does is it measures how many times you go through a loop and how many times you have to move new data through the loop. The more times, the less efficient. All right, so those are the set operators. And then what we're going to talk about is modifying data. And this stuff you may have encountered before. The other thing I want to say is that for the first time, we're doing things that are dangerous. Now, inserts are not terribly dangerous. We'll do those first. They are, you can get garbage in, right, if you're doing inserts, but generally they're not, it's like a row at a time. The most dangerous command, I think, is the update, which we will do in a minute. But these are changing the underlying data. All the stuff we do with the select is pretty much just copying, just showing data. It doesn't change the underlying database. These change the underlying database. So I'll do insert first, and you guys have seen inserts, right? So I'll do a couple of inserts. So I'll do insert into, oh, what do I want to insert into? That's books. It's not what I want. Community assist. I just want to do a simple insert. Let's insert a donation. So I'm going to insert into donation. They need more money anyway. They're grossly underfunded at this point. So you do insert into donation. You give the table name. Ideally, you should pull the fields over. I will show you something that you may or may not want to use. I'm going to grab the columns folder. In donation, I'm just going to drag it. Gives me all the fields. We do not insert into the key because it's an auto number. We also don't want to do the confirmation because it's a default. It's so auto-generated. So we just want to do those 3 fields. And you could type those in. I just pulled the columns folder over there to not type them in. So I am going to do values. And the word is always values, even if you're only doing one value. I am going to randomly choose 4 as a person key, something you shouldn't do. I'm going to say get date for the date, and how much do we want to donate? Anybody?
50,000.
What?
50,000.
That's a lot of money.
Oh, okay. 10,000. People do that.
They do. They do. I'm gonna do it 1,000. The donations on this tend to be smaller. Now this is an all you would need for a insert, but I want to talk about a couple of things. One, I used a function here. You can do that. You can put a function in the insert. All right, we're going to use a couple of functions in a minute. They're matched. It doesn't know what is what. In this case, it would probably throw an error if we flipped them around because the data types wouldn't match. Person key is an integer. This is a date. This is a decimal amount. All right, so flipping them around in this case would mess things up, but it doesn't understand the values. It's one, where this gets matched to this gets matched to this gets matched to this. If they're the same data types, like with strings, it's just doing them in the order, the sequence. That's the only way it knows what is what. Right? There's no artificial intelligence here that's reading your text. The other thing I'm going to do before I run this is I am going to show you that you can do more than one. So I'm going to do 7. These may be people that are actually asking for money, but I'm letting them donate also. Maybe they're so grateful that they asked that they're donating now. I will also do a get date. You could actually enter a date though. If you wanted, you could enter a date. You would just enter it in quotes. I'm going to do this as 500. The decimal places are not absolutely necessary. And you can keep doing that for as long as you want, right? Just do another comma. Just do another parentheses. And we'll just do 3,400. Okay. The last one doesn't have a comma. So I'm going to execute that. It says 3 rows affected down here. I know you can't see that because it's really tiny. I need to change that. But I'll do select star from donation. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. Okay, so let's go down to the very bottom. So we have 4, 7, and 34. These are today, right? 5, 7, 1,000, 500, 100, and that's their confirmation key, which is auto-generated. So that's a simple answer. Questions on that? You look puzzled, are you?
I just, maybe it's because I'm still taking the original class, but what is this doing to the data?
It's adding them.
Adding rows?
It's adding rows. Inserts add rows to the data. So we've added these 3 rows.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so inserts adds rows.
Where does, you were just telling it to add that information.
Right, so we added that, and it adds it down here. So our first one was 4, so 48, 49, no, actually it's 49, 50, and 51 are new rows. It has today's date, 5/7/2018. Also has the time, 10:41, right, when we did it. Does that make sense? We're just, inserts are for adding rows to tables. And you can only add to one table at a time. I'm going to show you how you would have to spread it out if we're doing it. Let's say we wanted to do a donation, but we wanted a brand new person to do the donation. Right? Because the tables are split up. You got person address, and you got donation. Yeah.
So I see that you added.
Right.
I see the update in person, key, donation date, and donation amount.
Right.
For the first column, donation key is actually auto-generated.
It's auto-generated.
Okay, sorry.
So when I created the table, which is actually an assignment coming up pretty soon, I told it to do something called an identity. And I told it, which basically is an auto number, it just counts. So the keys are just randomly added. Right, so the keys are just added. These keys have to exist. These are foreign keys. They have to exist in the person table. I didn't look at the person table to see who I was having donate, which theoretically they would log in, it would find their key, and then it would be relevant, the right key when it donates. I just randomly took keys. Yeah.
And that's the same for confirmation.
Confirmation is auto-generated too. It's a GUID, and there's a function that says get GUID. GUID being unique ID. Partially it was just to play with that. But yeah, it'll generate, it looks like a product key, right? So, and it guarantees that they're unique. I don't know how it does that. In other languages, they just call them UIDs. Microsoft calls them GUIDs. I'm not sure what the G stands for. Well, I don't think I'm not sure, because they're usually just considered unique IDs. But a lot of databases and stuff will generate these as well. It's kind of like some people use them for keys. I don't, because they're way too long. Imagine copying this over as a foreign key.
Global unique identifier.
Global, that's it. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to do a little bit more complicated, where we insert a new person, new address. Do I have a I changed it so that, no, there is a contact in this one too. So a new contact, and then a donation. Now you might want to do this all together in a form on a web page, but it still is going to involve 1, 2, 3, 4 inserts. Right. One of the things that we're going to do, in a week or so, is we'll do this much as a stored procedure. We'll write a stored procedure that does all of these, so that you don't have to always go in and do all 3 inserts. Right? But for now, we're going to do all 3, because inside the stored procedure, we'll have to do this anyway. So I am going to insert into person. Okay, so that's the first thing. One of the things about these inserts is that they have to be in the right order, because the foreign keys, foreign key setup. So I'm going to go again to person, and I'm going to just grab the columns. You don't have to do that, but it sure saves some typing. When you do that, you need to get rid of the person key because it's auto-generated. I'm going to so we have their password, which we could ignore. Guess I won't ignore it. Do I ignore it? We'll try it. Complicates things. Do we want to do the password or no? The problem is I'm going to do, if we do it, I need to declare at seed int set at seed equals EBOFX get seed. And then I think that would be enough. This is extra. This is something you usually don't have to do with the insert. We'll do it, I guess. All right, so I need to do values, not values. All right, so we need a last name. Anybody have a good last name that they want to use?
Curry.
Curry. You thinking of Indian food, or you just have
The
a,
Warriors.
The Warriors.
Yeah.
oh, the Warriors? So first name,
Steph.
what?
Steph.
Steph? Person email, I'm just going to do Steph Curry. MSN doesn't exist anymore, it's Outlook, but whatever. Person entry date, I'm going to just do get date, which is the function that returns the current date. Oh, I need to do the password before I do the date because they have to be in the right order. So there is a function f that I wrote, fx. Is it create password? So dbo.fx hash password. And it needs, I believe it takes the seed, and then it takes their password, which will be Curry Pass. I always do the first name, the last name and the word pass for this. Get date, and then the last thing, let me just sort of break this. Will be this at seed. Again, this is all more complicated than it needs to be because of the hash password. So this, as I said, this isn't part of the usual insert, but we need this seed. The seed is a random number. It's a random number that will be concatenated into with the password. The purpose of that is to prevent dictionary attacks. The dictionary attacks are if your password is a real word. A lot of times they just go through a dictionary and hash every word in the dictionary to see what matches. But when you have a random number concatenated in it, it should be able to do that. But you need to be able to retrieve the random number because if you're going to reconcatenate, which is a bit of a problem. Postgres, by the way, does this better because you don't have to store the seed. The seed is always, it's a little bit better. But anyway, so I'm going to insert that. And I have to do all the way up through the declare. Okay, so it says one row affected. That means it was written. But then we need to do, actually I shouldn't have done it right away. We need to know what the person key is, right, to do the next part, which is person address. So I'm going to select, actually you could do a select, but I'm going to do insert into person address. I should have, as I said, not have done that, run that one yet, because you can run them all together when you're done. I'm going to break that. I'm going to get rid of the person address key. Actually, I hate making up addresses. I'm tired of it, but I'm going to do values. And I'm going to, so let's just, I'm going to say null for apartment. Actually, we could get rid of city because it has a default value. And we could get rid of state because it has a default value. And we could just do person, address, street. Wherever that is. Zip 98100 or something. Now the person key is the problem. We need to know the person key. So one of the things you could do is you could go select and look it up. But again, if you were doing this in a form or something, you'd want to process these all together. SQL Server has a function called ident current. And inside of this, I'm going to do person. And what that does, and I need to close the quote on person. is it will return the last auto number generated in the table person, right? Which should be the person's key. Ident current returns the last identity or the last auto number from the table person.
And if we ran this all at the same time, would it just?
It would
grab the
do
one
it,
that
it would
was
grab it,
created?
right, as long as this was done first. Right, so as long as you insert this one first, it can grab the key that was just generated, use it there. And then we can use it, so I'm not gonna, I'm gonna do contact too. Insert into person contact. All right, it's just contact. And we'll take the values. So contact is up here. I'm just going to get the columns again. There's not very many here. So contact number is like a phone number. And I'm just going to 206-555-102, whatever. The contact type, I'm going to make 1, which is a home number. 2 is a work number. I just know that because I wrote the table. You'd have to look that up. Or you could do a subquery there if you really wanted to. Yeah.
Not to like backtrack a little bit, but I just want to make sure I understand. From line 41 through 47, you
Yeah.
added Steph Curry, all his information. You added it into the person table,
Right.
And that alone, if you were to run it, you would see that already in person.
Right. It already is there because I ran it. I didn't mean, I actually shouldn't have run it until all this was in place. But
And so now you're putting,
now I'm putting their address in.
okay,
And this ident current should get the person key for this person for step. And it will do the same here because it was the last person that was added, the last number that was added to the person. And if you're running these all together, the time between them is, a nanosecond. So it really shouldn't. There's no possibility that another one will creep in there. If you're taking as long as I am, and if multiple people were using the database, you might be in trouble. Yeah.
So I tried to use another approach. I declared a key and I said this key is select max employee key.
Right. Although that isn't always. Typically, that will work.
Mhm.
Most of the time, that will work. But sometimes when there's a lot of deletions and stuff going on, it can be. But probably it would work.
Like if there's a lot of deletion from the process.
Yeah. I mean, typically, when you're the single user of a database, all these things will work. It gets a little more complicated if there are multiple people using the database simultaneously. As I said, even this may not work in that case. Although if you run them all together, they happen within a nanosecond, so there's really not much chance of anything else sneaking in. Max usually works, yeah.
On the values, on number 54, the line there is number 1.
Right.
In the comments, what is that used for?
That stands for the contact type. So I'll just show you. This isn't part of the inserts here. And I just know what the contact type is. I'm just going to do select star from contact type. Again, this isn't part of the, so 1 is home phone, 2 is work phone, 3 is cell phone, 4 is pager, 5 is fax. Fax is there mostly so I could do a query what type was never used. Right. What?
Oh, at this point, 4 and 5 would.
Yeah, the pagers are never used much either. So let's do the very last one, which is insert into donation again. And for donation, we want, again, not the donation key or the confirmation. And then I will do still there? Yep. Ident person. Get date. And, ooh, let's make this person really generous. I consider 1,200 generous. All right. So we've already done Steph. So let's do the other three. I'm going to execute them all together. And notice that you probably can't see it, but it has one row affected, one row affected, one row affected. So for each row, that's one row affected. So we'll do some selects just to see if it worked. The point of doing this is just because of the structure of relational databases, a lot of times when you want to insert simple information, it involves inserting it into multiple tables. Does that make sense? And you're going to have to know keys. This ident current only works if you're using auto numbers. If your keys are not auto numbers, you're going to have to look them up some other way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I keep getting an error message that my identity number is like.
So did
off
you?
Or something.
No, so one of the things, make sure that there's no person address key, no contact key. I think you probably have a key. Let's look this up. Get rid of the smaller font. Yeah. You can't explicit, yeah, personality. Is there a person key in that table?
Oh, that one?
No, in personality. Up there we have personality.
Yeah.
And person key.
Oh.
Well, did you do the person before?
Oh, there. I think so.
Well, that's going to happen down below. Did you do the person before that?
Oh, okay. So registered.
Yeah. I don't see why that would work. Mine would work. One of the things about inserts is that they, well, sometimes they'll only work once. Like this one will only work once, right? Partially because there's a unique constraint, which we'll talk about constraints later, but there's a unique constraint on the email, so they can't repeat. Some of these others, though, you can probably repeat as many times as you want. So I'm not sure. I mean, you don't want to, but because you'd have duplicate data. Let's just see if it all worked, and then I will troubleshoot a little bit more. So I'm going to do select star from person. And let's see what our person's key is and make sure all of that is in there. So I'm going all the way to the bottom. I could just do like where max. So there's Steph Curry. Steph Curry, she's 130 in my database. There's her email. There's her hashed password. There's the date, and there's the person seed, the random number seed. So that part worked. So let's do select star from person address. And there should be one at the very bottom that has, right, a null for that address, Seattle, Washington, because they were built-in defaults, 9800. 130 is the person key, so I copied that over. There should, what?
Sorry, why is it null?
What?
Why is it showing up as null? I'm sorry.
Because we told it was null.
Oh.
Remember up, let's go back up to the, right here, we're doing the address, we said null.
Ah,
Null means they don't have an apartment.
right.
Some of these, like the one person didn't have a city or a state. That's okay. But we did, the only thing we did there was null. Everything else came through. And 130 is the right person key. If we select star from contact, we should have at the very bottom, 130 is the person key, the phone number that we entered. And then the very last one is donation. And donation should have a person key of 130 at the very end too. So there it is, 130 is the person key. $1,200 and then the
Sorry, the null comment I made. When I saw a bunch of nulls, I thought you had affected those. Those are existing ones. You were just talking about.
They're existing. The only row we've added is the very last one. Did you figure out what was going on yet? Other questions? Are they in there?
Steph Curry.
All right. Choose 130. So if you run the second one, choose by yourself. Don't run the second.
Okay.
So just run this. Actually, should we run all three of those? Oh, let's run one. Yeah, no, don't run that. But they aren't each personalities. Yeah, that's about it.
I mean, did we just?
We just did stuff,
Oh,
and that's good. So we did a little bit of personalities. Just run personalities just by itself.
is this?
No.
Oh, okay.
Some statements. doesn't interfere with what we're doing next.
Okay.
I just don't see anything wrong with what you wrote. Any other one, anybody else having problems with those? They should, usually inserts go really smoothly. So we have changed the database with these. We've added records to the database. Does that make sense? And the ident current is just because, you know, as I said, it only works if the primary key is an auto number. If it's not an auto number, you're going to have to look it up some other way. Although if it's not an auto number, you probably had to enter it right above, so you probably know it anyway. Does that make sense when you created the person? What else would I say? The get date you don't have to do, but get date just gives you the current date. And usually you probably wouldn't have to do the hash password bit. All right, so let's look at updates. We got up to 80 yet? Yeah, it's actually not quite too fast. It's 78.3. All right, so updates, I think, are the most dangerous command in the database, and I'm going to show you why. They are where you inserts add new rows. Updates are for changing values in existing rows. All right, so like if you say you mistype somebody's address, you could go in and do an update to fix it, to change the address. Or if somebody's name changed, they got married or they just did a name change, you could go in and update their information to change the existing name, right? So I am going to do something, and if you follow what I'm going to do, well, actually, let's do it safely. I'm going to copy everything into a new table. Because you could, there are some ways you could do this, and I'll show you, that are safer, but if you screw up, you'll have to recopy the database. So I'm going to, I'll create table. I'm going to call it person2. And I'm not real concerned about their person key, so I'm just going to do person last name, varchar, in varchar. Not going to worry about a primary key. So by the time we create tables, which is like one assignment down, or pretty soon, you will have done it a few times. This is enough, I think. I'm just going to do email. All right, so that's going to be my person2. I'm not going to copy everything because I just want to show you the, I'm going to execute that. It'll create the table. And then I'm going to insert into person2. And we did this once before. And I'm going to person last. Well, actually, I don't have to because I'm going to do select person first name. Let's do person last name. Person first name. Person email. From person. Ignore my weird capitalization. Oops, I've already created the table. I don't want to do that again. So it says 130 rows affected. So if I do select star from person 2, I should have all the people with their emails, first name, last name, and email. And the only reason I did this is that we can mess this table up without any consequences. So first I'm going to do an update correctly. Except it would be nice. I should have maybe kept it. So let's change Jay Anderson to Jason Anderson. So I am going to update. Okay. And the table, I'm going to update person 2. So you say what table you're going to update. And then you say, I am going to set person first name equals Jason, where person, and I'm just going to use their email, which is unique. So generally you want to have a where clause that uniquely identifies the value that you are updating. You can update multiple values at once, but so let's do, I'm going to just execute that. And then if I select star from person 2, you'll see that it's now Jason Anderson instead of Jay Anderson. Right? So we've changed that now. You could change other values too. I'll run this again with another change. I'm just going to do a comma here, and I'm going to say person last name. And we'll just make it Andrews. All right, so you can do multiple fields by just doing a comma. You only have to use the set keyword once. So if I run it again now, it'll be Jason Andrews. Okay. I'll worry about the email later. It's a problem because I'm using the email as the identifier. I didn't put a primary key in there. Does that make sense? That's how to do it. You should always have a where clause, and then you can do this. In real life, we will talk about setting up stored procedures and things. I would never give a user update permissions directly. I would always make them do it through a stored procedure or something. And the reason why, I am going to, and I'm actually going to show you something you can do. I'm going to do begin tran, but assume that you hadn't done that. If you're doing what I'm doing, you might want to do the begin tran. I'm going to execute that. That's a beginning a transaction. And then I'm going to update person 2, set person last name, and I'm going to set it to Smith. Now maybe we wanted to change somebody's name to Smith, but what happens if I don't do a where clause?
Every last name becomes Smith.
Right, so now if I do select star from person 2, everyone is Smith. There's no undo, there was no warning. I mean, there is an undo because I did begin tran, but generally there's no undo, there's no warning. I usually say this is my matrix moment, everybody becomes Smith. This could get you fired. Say there's a million people in there and you just change their name to Smith. It's really hard to recover that information because there's no, the only way you can recover if you hadn't done the begin tran. And generally that's a problematic in an actual commercial environment because I've just frozen the database until I finish this. Right now we're still in limbo because I haven't completed the transaction, but the whole database is frozen because of this. So you really can't do that in a production database. I will show you ways you can do that, like within a stored procedure. Because then the begin tran, end tran all executes. Within a nanosecond, doesn't do any damage. But right now I've frozen the database. For other people, I've got exclusive access to it for a while. That's not good necessarily. Right? But if you were to do this, the only way to recover, and this is assuming that you have good backups and that you've been logging it, is to restore your backups and then restore the log up to the moment where you did your dumb thing. Which means taking the database offline, which could be a problem too. And if you haven't been backing things up, like there's no backups for this database, you're just screwed. That's all there is. There's no undoing. Now this begin tran, which again makes more sense. I can say, because I started that, I can say rollback tran, and it will undo what I've done. So now if I go back, everything will be as it was. But if I hadn't done the begin tran, there's no rollback. Right? And the tran and rollback tran. I think you have to list these. Going to select, I don't think you can do select. Star. Yeah.
Would rollback tran end the freeze of?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does. There's two choices you have. You can roll back or you can commit. Yeah.
Whatever makes sense. I guess maybe if your database is like super big, it wouldn't make sense, but to like duplicate the database and then do all your changes and then
Possibly. I mean, if you're doing something that you know is really dangerous, as I said, I'm going to show you how to do some of these in the context of store procedure where you're protected against doing something stupid, which is how I would generally set it up. I mean, this is something you have to do a lot, go in and just update the data, make changes to existing data because the data changes. But it's dangerous because if you screw up, then you've really screwed up. Yeah.
And just to be clear, the only reason why JSON or the row 1 or whatever is being changed is because you specify it has to be where it equals J_Anderson.
Right.
The only way.
And generally, I didn't put it in here, but I would put I would probably use the primary key as the where. So if we do this in actual person, so I will do this, and again, if you do this in person, you need to be careful, but I'm going to do person, and I will do set, I'm going to do the same thing here, but I'm going to change their email too. And then I'm going to do just a comma here, and we're going to do person email equals we'll do it as J Andrews. Can't type. At gmail.com. And then we want to say where person key equals 1. Right? So, because that'll mean it's only that person. And I have 2 sets, which I don't need. So when we do this, that'll work. But if you don't have a where clause, it'll, it could screw up everything. And, typically if you come in, you're tired, you're in a hurry, you need to make a quick update, it's when you can screw up. You forget. Or if you said, so I'm going to do a quick select from person to show those changes went through. So it's now Jason Andrews and jandrews@gmail.com. So you have to be careful when you're doing that kind of thing. What else was I going to say? Sometimes you do want to change multiple things at once. That's why it's not forbidden. But this is dangerous. I'm going to order by last name. The person key is person last name. So we've got like two Bakers here. What if I just said where last name equals Baker, right? It would apply to both of those Bakers. You got to be careful of what your criteria is. And your best criteria is usually primary key. Because the last name, again, you would affect everybody that has that last name. That's probably not what you want to do. You know, you just, here, the emails are unique because there is a unique constraint right now. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. Did you have another question?
Oh, no, I was stretching. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So updates are not hard syntactically. They're just a little dangerous. Other questions? And again, they're really, I mean, they're things that you have to do. You have to change existing data all the time because of different, you know, things that happen. But it's something you need to be really careful of. I was going to do a quick update where you change everything. So I'm going to, let's do a quick select. I'm going to call it from grant type. So these are like the one-time maximum and then the lifetime. Let's say we wanted to increase all of those by 5%. That makes sense. The reason why you can do updates, why it doesn't throw any errors when you don't have a thing, is maybe you do want to do. So look at the first one there, it's 200 and 1,000. So I'm going to update, update grant type, and I'm going to set grant type maximum equals, and I'm going to do grant type maximum again. Times 1.05. That should be a point. Comma, and then I'm going to do grant type lifetime maximum equals grant type lifetime maximum times 1.505. So we're raising the maximums by 5%. And I'm not putting a where criteria because I'm going to do it to all of them. And then when I look at that, now this, instead of 200, it's 210 and it's 1,050. Right? It raised all these prices by 5%.
Where you did the where on like 90,
Right.
or that would include the person key only for that.
It would only affect this one person.
And so let's say in that data there from 91 to 93, I actually screwed up the email name while doing it. Can I then just redo from 90?
Oh yeah, you could do this. You could do exactly the same thing here, or you could just, if it's just the email, you could do update person, set person email equal whatever the new email is, where person key equals 1. Right, so you always want to individualize it. If you don't do the where, everybody's going to have the same email. And the reason why they don't, as I said, they don't throw an error is it is possible you do want to update everything at once. So it's a rarer update, but so we increased all of our maximums by 5%. Yeah. You might want to actually do that. To take it back to where it was, I'd have to do reverse math. I'll just leave them higher. The very last thing I want to show, this is taking a little longer than I thought it was. I didn't think it would take the hour. We'll do a delete. So delete is dangerous too, but it isn't necessarily as dangerous as updates. It depends on the table. I'm going to do begin tran. Again, these are useful when you're doing it on your own machine. These are good. On a production machine, people would be cussing you, because they'd be being kicked off. They wouldn't be allowed on the database while you were doing this. So I am going to make sure when you write it, it's not enough to write it. You actually have to run it. Otherwise, you have no protection. I'm going to delete. I'm actually just going to do delete from person. And this would delete everybody in the person table, except we should get an error. All right, and the error is, I should make this bigger, it can't be delete. You can't delete a parent that has children. Does that make sense? People in the person table have related records in person address, and they have related records in contact, and they have related records in grant. You can't delete a parent that has children. You'd have to delete all the children before you could delete the parent, which sounds very cruel, kind of game of Games of Thrones. Okay? But you basically can only delete a parent after you've removed all the children. So in a table like person, delete isn't too dangerous because you really can't delete anything, except if you had a person that didn't have any child tables. Does that make sense? But person address is a child table. So I'm still suspended in transaction, so let's do rollback. Okay, I'm going to begin tran again because I'm going to do something that's really stupid, and I'm going to do person address. Must be spelled right. Person address is a child table that has no further children. If I were to do this makes me nervous. 136 rows are affected. So if I were to, real quickly before I do the rollback, select star from person address, there's nobody there. There's no addresses there. So the rollback hopefully will work. Yes. And now when I do this, they're back. What happens with the tran is everything is held in suspension in the temporary database until you either commit it, which writes it, or you roll it back, which undoes it. Right? So delete on a parent table is, you can't delete anything with a child, but on a child table, delete is fairly dangerous. The way you want to do a delete is pretty much the way you want to do. So what do we have for deletes? Is there anything I could delete that I want to delete? Let's delete our last donation. So first let me find the number for the last donation. I'm just going to do select star from donation. And it's 52. So I could say delete, and I'll do begin tran just to show you we haven't done a commit yet. Again, you don't have to do a commit tran, and in a production environment, this is a problem. All right. This is still in the, I just need to remember what the number was. It was 130, no, it's 52. Delete from donation. And then you would want to say where donation key equals 52. And this will work. I mean, this isn't dangerous either way. So I execute that one row. If I do this donation, that last donation should be gone. So there's a 51, but no 52. And I will commit tran, which will make that a real thing. It'll write it to the actual database. And now there's no getting donation number 52 back. I don't want to do that. I want to just select the donation. Okay. This bothers some people, but your next auto number here will be 53. When you delete a row, the auto number never comes back.
Is that so you know something happened?
Well, yeah, it's basically to protect your data integrity so that in case there's no like ghost keys that could have referred to two different things. When you delete a row, that number never comes back. And also sometimes SQL Server will do this with identity. Some of you may have noticed it. You're going wrong at like 45, 50, and the next one is 1700. And I have no idea why it does that gigantic leap, but it doesn't matter. This is arbitrary as long as it uniquely identifies the row. So I think that's everything. Questions on that? I mean, so just as a quick, the two things have actually very little to do with each other. It's just that in the union, the set things are fairly brief. So we did union, where you join, it basically combines two things. You know, in our case, it was the employee table and the person table. We just combined them. And then there's the intersect, which shows where two tables have commonality, and except, which shows what's different. The one thing about except is that it's always what's different. What is different in this one from this one, and if you flip them, you can get different values. So those were the set theories, and then just insert, update, and delete. One other thing I will show you, which probably you should know. So when you delete, notice when you do delete, you don't specify what columns, because you never delete a column. You always delete a whole row of data. Right? So columns are irrelevant. You always delete a row. The other thing is that deletes remove things from data. I mean, they will remove the data. But if you want to remove the object itself, the word is drop. I'm going to show two things. There's another thing that will empty a table. I'm going to truncate. I think do I have to say table? Person 2. Truncate is the same as delete all. I mean, it's basically, it'll delete everything in there. So if I execute that, and then I do select from person 2, you'll see that it's empty. So truncate is a real quick way to empty it. It still won't do it if it's a parent table, right? If I did this on people or person, it wouldn't do it because they have related records. But truncate, it will get rid of all the data, but the table still exists. So if I want to get rid of the table itself, I can do drop table or person 2. And when I run that, the table no longer exists. So if I try to do select, I'll get an error that it doesn't exist.
So what's the difference between the two?
Drop removes the object. Drop removes the table itself. Truncate and delete remove the data from the table. But the table itself, when I say drop table person 2, that table no longer exists in the database. And the most deadly drop of all is you can say drop database. And if you drop the database, it's gone. Period. No, are you sure? It's just gone. Yeah.
I don't have to delete the database. It says it's in use.
Right, you can't delete it while it's in use, so you have to switch to masters. What database are you thinking to delete?
What's wrong with it? I messed up the things, so I need to do it again.
All right, so go to another database like this. Make sure it's not in the list. And then try to drop it.
I have those files.
Yeah, you can redo it.
They are still there. I don't need to download it again.
Well, if you don't need to download, so it depends, where are they? They're still in your download folder? If they are, then you can just extract them again. But when you say okay here, remember all files will be gone from the data. But yeah, you should be fine basically. One of the reasons, the nice things about having the files on GitHub and maybe on your disk is that if you do really screw up, you can go get the files again.
When you create a table a little bit further up,
Yeah.
just to be sure, I understand. You just did that basically like copy and paste, like so you could like manipulate that table.
I just,
Like,
yeah,
it's sort of like that essence or that.
I just made a real a table and then copied all these. I copied these three fields from the person table into this table,
Uh-huh.
and,
So you're
and
just
I did it just so I didn't. If I screwed up bad, it would only be on the person table, person
Right.
two table.
So you're just creating it just to like help manipulate and show this stuff.
Yeah, it's purely for the purposes of demo. We will be doing some create table stuff, but we'll do that later. We'll actually add tables. So, I mean, when you create a table, you just create table, give it a name. It begins and ends with the parentheses. You list the field names and the data types and how big they are. We'll talk about that more when we do it. In varchar is just Unicode variable character width. 255 is width, which is maximum width, actually.
With for what?
How many characters you can store in the field?
285 in your book shows an example.
Yeah. There are, actually in the book, I think they do create tables first. But I found that it makes more sense after people have been working with tables for a while. They know more what they're doing when they create a table. Creating them at first is a bit weird. Although, at one time I used to have people create the database that we're going to use. And then I would give them data to populate it with, insert statements. But it always failed because people weren't consistent on how they defined their tables. So we will be doing create tables soon. And we'll also create temp tables, which are a little bit different because they don't have permanent existence. We'll create permanent tables and we'll create temp tables. I think that's it for the day. I used up all your time, so you will have Wednesday. And did you ever get the inserts to work?
I mean, I haven't tried.
I will take a closer look in a minute. Let me stop the video and copy the code to the